Quantum is building to a crescendo, but whenever the beat drops or the crescendo hits, there's going to be just this amazing rush of people that are going to want to hire a quantum specialist, or even, I think right now, I think the big hotness is quantum consultants. You basically, if I'm a Fortune 1000 company, I want to talk to somebody about,
Right, yeah.
how is this a risk to my business? How is this an opportunity to my business? I think that's where we are now.
Quantum is moving out of the lab and into the real world. The question is, who's ready? Welcome to Impact Quantum.
The universe dances, it's snug as a rug. Quantum podcast, turn it up fast. Candace and Frank blowing my mind at last. Quantum podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emerging industry, not just field, but an entire industry of quantum computing, where you don't need to have a PhD. You just need to be a little bit curious. And with me on this discussion journey is the most quantum curious person I know, Candace Kahuli. How's it going, Candace?
It's great. Thank you so much. I'm really excited. You know, we have something different today and something I think that's incredibly important and very exciting. So we're going to be speaking with James Davies, and he is the founder of Embedded Electronics Recruitment Solutions. Okay, so he does quantum technology recruitment.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about someone who
Some days it is, yeah.
I can imagine. But I mean, you probably have your finger on the pulse of exactly what the job market looks like, and you can probably get a good feel for the pace and the can't think of the fancy word for it, but vector of the industry. So welcome to the show, James.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No problem.
So one of the first ones I've done, podcasts, that is, I guess.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, thanks for the invite.
No problem. Normally we're a little better organized. It's just today we had snow. We were talking to virtual green room, and the kids had a 2-hour delay opening, so everything is
Sorry, I honestly get it. And like I was saying, if 4 inches of snow would 100% shut the entirety of the UK down, there would be nothing going on, which would be fine for me. I work from home most of the time anyway, so right. You know, actually I'd probably quite like it, but yeah. You know, still
cool. It could be worse. Once I was in Texas, in Dallas, and they had like an inch of snow and it shut everything down.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting there like, you know, my wife is from Pittsburgh and they get a lot of snow, and she always makes fun of how we handle things here in DC, Baltimore. But I'm like, my God, like an inch of snow is shutting you guys down? That was a new one. All right, so back to this. So clearly, you know, what made you want to be, how'd you get into being a quantum specific recruiter?
How did I get into it?
And your LinkedIn URL that you reserved, very well played, sir. It says quantum-recruitment specialist. I was like, that's awesome, man. That's branding done right.
Yes, it is.
So that, I think I wouldn't say I fell into it. As you could probably tell from the name of my company, Embedded Electronics, it wasn't initially intended to be quantum technology specific. I think when I set up, I thought, you know, great, I can do whatever I want, but actually I think you quickly find you become spread way too thin. So I spent a bit of time with a business coach that I used to work with, and he said, really, you should be looking at something called PESTLE, which is, you know, like political, economic, and to figure out what would be a good area to sort of look into. And as I started doing some research, I came across sort of quantum technology, and I realized I knew a few people in the sector. So I sort of reached out to them and carried on doing a little bit of research. And I realized that, you know, from a political and economic and social economic standpoint, that all things were pointing in the right direction, and did a little bit more research and realized, oh, okay, actually this is about 100 years old, and they've been building and building and building, and now it looks like we're kind of at a bit of an inflection point where actually companies are spinning out at a rate and growing at a rate where perhaps they're not able to grow organically like they may have done historically, you know, spin out, hire from their sort of from their research institute or within their group, or even perhaps know of all the companies, you know, that might be doing something that they're specifically focused on, or that they can turn their degree to, or their doctorate even. So yeah, I think I thought this is great. I love the technology. I think it's really interesting. I struggle to understand some of it, at a deep level anyway. Yeah, I thought, yeah, I'll go for it 100%.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I think that what you're seeing, I think that whenever the quantum is building to a crescendo, but whenever the beat drops or the crescendo hits, there's going to be just this amazing rush of people that are going to want to hire quantum specialists, or even, I think right now, I think the big hot mess is quantum consultants. You basically, if I'm a Fortune 1000 company, I want to talk to somebody about,
Right, yeah.
how is this a risk to my business? How is this an opportunity to my business? I think that's where we are now. But at some point, POCs are going to need to be built, right? And you're going to need to have, and that's the whole premise of the show, actually, since the reboot of the podcast is like, it's not just going to be about quantum physicists. It's just going to be about, you're going to need someone to sell the solutions. You're going to need someone to market them. You're going to need recruiters. You're going to need, so I think it's cool to have an actual honest to God recruiter here, because that way we can kind of get a feel for like what, I mean, are you seeing any trends? I mean,
Yeah,
when did you
100%.
decide to?
I think it's interesting that you mentioned around consultants. I've spoken to probably over a dozen people now, which might not sound like a huge number, but it's still a relatively small field, who have perhaps come from some of the most respected research institutes, and actually they're kind of, they maybe don't want to stay within academia, or they've worked for a few of the companies out there already, and there is a real niche there, or niche, if you're in North America, where perhaps actually they've realized that some of the companies, BMW prime example, where they perhaps have the money and they want to implement this into their sort of, I don't know, materials or logistics, finance, whatever it might be, but they perhaps don't understand which of the technologies or modalities is going to work best for them, where they should be placing the funds, those sorts of things. So you can take, I don't know, probably reasonably public knowledge, JP Morgan Chase are investing into a quantum technology team, that's one approach, but other companies like Volvo are using consultants. They're bringing them in to go, okay, well, you've worked for Chalmers or whoever it might be. Can you tell us which of these technologies is going to be best utilized for us? So there's definitely a trend there, for sure, on that front alone, and many others.
So which sub areas of quantum technology, hardware, algorithms, sensing, etc., are currently hiring the most aggressively?
Hiring the most aggressively? I wouldn't say necessarily most aggressively. I would say that I'd probably break it down in a few different areas, from what I'm sort of seeing, from what I'm personally seeing, and obviously there's a lot of good resource out there that you can look into or buy into, perhaps, if you need more detailed reports. Quantum and defense, usually we're seeing these two words tied together, rightly or wrongly. I think we've got to be realistic. It's an application it's at the forefront, and that's where a lot of the money's coming from, and where they're really pushing things is communication. And I think people also forget a lot about sensing, whether this is for gravity-based systems for submarines or naval vessels, or GPS denied areas, and also the obvious communications. How can we encrypt, decrypt? How can we make it more secure? A lot of money's flowing in from those areas. NATO's Diana program, they've been pumping a lot of money into quite a few relatively minute QKD startups that have been spinning up all out of Europe. The same's happening, obviously, in America, out of the NCC. I think they've got a few different things going on, and then some of the major defense contractors have actually been doing NG's got a really interesting team that I think they've flown under the radar a bit. I've spoken to a few people from there. They've actually delivered some really interesting stuff. I'm just trying to think some of the publications and patents that they put out there. I remember speaking to one of them thinking I've not seen any of the sort of GQI or any of the big names talking about the work that they've put out there. So I'd say those areas, I think, although they haven't been getting the headlines, I think they're probably the most likely to scale really quickly. The computing side's really complicated. It's like really, it's all complicated. It's all hard. Like there's no simple job I've yet to see. Or perhaps a hiring team that just want a plodder, should we say, who sort of can fill a certain sort of area. So I'd say that area in sensing and communications, although it's maybe not getting huge headlines, I think that's probably going to be productized really quickly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
It does. And you also dropped a few acronyms that, just in case people may not know, QKD. I think you meant quantum key distribution.
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I mean, as we build out this jargon, like people are, it's inevitable, right? I work in IT, right? I am one to complain, but like, I know that we have a lot of people that are like, QKD, like, what's that? Like,
yeah, there's quite a few. There's quite a few communications, QKRNG, and all the different ones. But effectively, yeah, if we're talking about random number generators.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was,
so as we all know, there's no true random number generator.
Right.
Or maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. Which is apparently why I was told you should always change your router password when you get a new Wi-Fi set-top box, which I haven't, because if anyone goes past spoofing that perhaps, and they know the manufacturer, they can.
Right.
Anyway. If they're that clever, that I don't have anything interesting on my internet anyway. So
That's right.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point, right? Because I know random number generation is random numbers are part philosophy, part math, right? And there's a Dilbert cartoon where I guess he's in the Dilbert universe, right? So I guess the accountant department is all trolls, like, and he goes in there and he goes, oh, this is Hank. He's our random number generator, and just keeps going 5, 5, 5, 5. And then Dilbert's like, that's not random. I know what he's going to say. And then in the middle panel, he looks at him, gives him like a scowl and goes 6, 6,
Yeah.
6, 6. And then he's like, with random numbers, you really can't tell. And there's a little bit of truth to that.
Yeah. But I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to dig up. I'll put in the show notes where that.
But there is I think the computing and qubit count quite rightly gets a lot of the headlines. And I know I don't want to talk too acronym heavy, but it's obviously still at a very early stage. If you
right.
I feel like every conference I go to that's perhaps not purely quantum technology, I do often see
Right.
those early day computers at the start of the presentation to set it up. It's like the common thing, but I think actually the communications and sensing sides perhaps left out of the limelight a little bit. And I think that's probably going to be productized and implemented really quickly.
So how has the talent landscape changed in the past, 2 years, 3 years, maybe, right? Are companies competing head to head for certain talent?
So what's probably different is so I think prior to working specifically on sort of quantum technology, I think I've worked in various different STEM sectors that are either very science or engineering focused, and I think those are sort of very well established sectors where perhaps finding a job is a case of just applying to a few different companies. What's probably different within this sector is that a lot of the companies, they actually know each other quite well. They're almost sort of frenemies, and perhaps they're competing for similar funds from similar places. So actually, what I've seen, which I've not seen in any other sector, which I think goes to show how early things really are, is that I think would be a good example. I went to a conference, and all of the companies there were openly talking about their scaling challenges to each other in an open room, in an open forum. There is no way you would go to a semiconductor and see any of the other manufacturers next to each other openly talking about their technology. Their IP would be hidden. And don't get me wrong, maybe some of the larger players that's sort of embedded, like IBM, they might be a little bit more inherently, would keep it under wraps sort of thing, but that's fine. That was a real eye opener for me. And then what I quickly realized was that actually a lot of these companies, they have a sort of effectively like I won't call it a non-aggression pact, but perhaps like a no poaching pact, an MPP, I suppose, where effectively you'll have a group of, say, 10 or 12 companies where effectively they've all agreed non-contractually, it's probably not legally binding, where they won't hire from each other. Now, I think there is a shelf life for that, because the level of funding that's now coming in effectively means these companies' hands are going to be getting forced. They're going to be, the accountants are going to be getting involved. So I think we're going to start to see things evolve beyond that sort of very friendly handshake deal where perhaps they're all going out for, sort of meets, which I think is fantastic. It's the only way that they can push the technology forward. It needs all these people together, the combined thought and ideas of all of them to sort of drive this forwards. But I think sadly, as the money comes in from, venture capital, private equity, defense funding, government funding, all of these different things combining and going to start forcing the hand. It's going to become very much a commercial industry. And that's kind of sad, but also a reality. It's unlikely that those companies will be able to sustain that whilst trying to grow their own business. There's perhaps 100 people who can
quaint
do
little
that specific
village
thing.
When the quaint little village turns into a major metropolis, you're going to see a lot of sociological changes, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Although maybe it won't be as bad as we think it'll be, right? Like, because if you look at kind of the open source world, I mean, you have, the open source world. I mean, there's competition, but for the most part, it's a more collegial environment, I suppose would be the word for it, right? As opposed to cutthroat, like, I never lived in London, but I can imagine it's very much like New York that way, right? Like, you have that kind of.
If we're just looking at the floor, don't look at me.
I'm getting my seat on the train or the tube, and I don't care what I have to do it. Like, I don't know. Like, it'll be interesting. Will it be more civil? Will it be, will it go kind of the way of the semiconductor industry, which is historically been very much cutthroat, or will it be more like kind of more modernish open source, where it's kind of like, there are definitely moats, but there are definitely points of collaboration.
I'd like to think that it would be the latter. I think there's some areas, like perhaps, if we draw a parallel to, the general semiconductor, well, we got like 5 actual fabricators, there's kind of, you have to go here, or if you want this equipment, you have to buy it from TSMC. Like they're the only company you can go to, so they're just a natural monopoly. I think that's already kind of happening with the computing side. The dominant players are, they're already shuffling, and some are using their available funds better. IonQ is the only company who seems to be going out there and going, right, we're going to buy this, we're going to buy this, we're going to buy it, we're going to acquire everything. We want to be. I'm not an MBA, but it looks like they're effectively acquiring to be full stack, so that they're unacquirable effectively. No one can sort of go in and take them out. But I think for the others, Oxford Arnix, these companies that they're going to get bought into bigger companies, you know, and that might be the goal of some. It's probably not the dream of most of them, you know, as they're scaling their company. But
that is an interesting point, right? Because like one of the, you know, when I started working with startups, oh my God, this is like 15 years ago. I started doing startup evangelism back when I was at Microsoft. It was, you know, there was always this debate of, do I want to go public? Do I want to like do this, or do I want to exit, basically get bought out? And this is like, this one lady who ran the local incubator here in DC. She's like, she says it more poetically. Maybe we'll get her on the show, get her opinion about quantum startups, but something to the effect of, you know, getting bought out by a larger company and you get a big check is still a success, right? Because, and most people in that situation tend to want to grow to a bigger company, right? Elon Musk is probably the poster child for that, right? Where nobody remembers the first company that he was at. Was it called Zip2 or ZipX or?
I have
It
no
was
idea.
something. It was something really small, like, and it's only like a footnote in his in the book about him. So it was basically something like, I know someone's going to put me in the comments, but it was something like a replacement for the phone book, like in the early internet days. And he basically cashed out of that and then started another company, right? And then ultimately, you know, as of recording this, he's still the richest man in the world, right? So like, you know, an exit doesn't have to be your final exit. I think was the way she said it, way more political, more not political, but polished than I did. But it was kind of like, you know, what, getting bought out. If you're Sam McQuan founder and I have this grand vision, I'm going to be the next Andy Grove, right? Right. And I'm going to be like this big shot, you know, Jensen Huang for the younger kids, right? I have this vision. I'm going to be doing that, right? You could still do that. It may take you a couple of jumps to get there, but you could still do it. Right? And just because you sell out to a larger company, it doesn't mean that your startup dream is over, right? So
no, absolutely not. And I think usually they'll need to sort of stay within it.
right.
And I think probably, again, you know I've said how the sector is different to many others that I've spent, you know, a lot longer in, you know, is that this is probably the only one where the governments are coming in not out of nowhere. It kind of, maybe it feels like out of nowhere, and going, actually, hang on a minute, no, this isn't happening like that. You know, and I think that's also going to evolve quite quickly. That's going to. Sorry, I'm not being clear there. Let's use. I mentioned Oxford. We'll use that as an example. You know, Sale comes in, we'll have
Right.
$1 billion. You know, $1 billion or whatever it was, and a pretty much all stock deal anyway. But you know, they come in. Yeah, that's fine. In the bigger picture of things, $1 billion is not a big sale. You know, in
No.
global terms, you know, this is a relatively small amount of money. Governments typically wouldn't be getting involved at that level, you know, especially not in Washington or at number 10. All of a sudden, they're going, okay, yeah, sure, you can have that, but it all has to stay here. This IP will not leave. Yes, you can have it, but this is staying here, this is staying here, and this is staying here. That doesn't happen in other sectors, you know. If one country's, you know, it just doesn't happen anywhere else. And I think that's going to be an interesting evolution, and it's going to. I won't name names of companies here, but I think perhaps the whole sovereignty debate is gone a bit deeper than probably most people realize. So I have placed several people who work for companies now where effectively they're really quite happy, but a government has come in and mandated that a certain part of their tech stack cannot be done from outside of their sovereign nation. Even down to things like QEC, quantum error correction, for those who might not know, Shaw's algorithm, whatever it might be. You know, the government's effectively stepped in and said, that's fine. You can have staff, you can set up offices wherever you want within Europe, Asia, Australasia, you know, wherever it might be. However, this part of the stack, this part of the stack, and this part of the stack, the staff have to be based here or here. That's it. You know, no Five Eyes, no great Canada, US, UK, Australia. Yeah, we're all friends. Yeah, no, that's fine, but this doesn't apply here. You know, that doesn't actually get talked about. You know, that's already happened.
True.
You know, and it goes completely under the radar. And I think it goes probably talks to that deeper fear and lack of understanding that the governments have. You know, the AI sort of came out, and I think it's a great tool, but it has massive limitations. I think the difference with quantum technology is, I don't want to say Quantum Leap, which was a great show when I was a kid, you know, like it's a real leap into like a completely different realm of power, you know, that we probably don't fully appreciate or understand just yet. You know, like this is a quantum mechanical revolution, you know.
That's a good way to
and
put it.
current
I would
versus Bugatti,
imagine,
you know.
I would imagine that if you go back actually to the UK, like during World War II, right? Like computer science was, I don't know if it was regulated, I don't know the details, but you know, it was definitely a clandestine effort, right? Bletchley Park and all that, it was clandestine. It wasn't just like this. So I think that given the same, I mean, ultimately it's the same problem space that makes this technology. I mean, it's the same thing, right? It's encryption, right? It's about national security. I can totally understand why they would do that. Do I like it? No, but I understand it. And you know, we are fortunate to be 80-ish years removed from a full-on knockdown, drag-out, like global conflict.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll make it another
Keep
80
our
years.
fingers crossed, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to make another 80 years. I'm hoping we make it for another 20, but you know, I could totally see why number 10 or the you know, the Washington DC kind of set is very alarmed about this, right? As they should be. If they weren't alarmed, I'd be really worried and really mad too, because like spend a lot of tax dollars. Certain things that they should just be on the ball about. But I think it's interesting, and like you said, the Five Eyes and all that. So for those who don't know, the Five Eyes, that's basically the 5 intelligence agencies that cooperate. It's Australia, UK, Canada, US, and somebody else.
France, I think.
New Zealand? I thought it was all the English-speaking countries. Anyway, someone will let us know in the comments.
So someone's going to put this in the comments.
But I mean, we're all friends. But you know, even with your friends, you don't always share all your dirty laundry, right? And I can totally see this being like the dirty laundry, right? This is like, I mean, because whoever figures out quantum error correction, you can. I think I blame it all on Shor's algorithm. I think if this was not so heavy on the fact you could break encryption or, you know, conventional encryption, I think you'd see a lot more of that chummy like academic spirit. But because Shor's algorithm is a major benefit of quantum computing or the approach, I think that's why you see a lot of this paranoia. Now, is the paranoia justified? You never can tell until it's too late, right? So, I mean, one of my favorite stories is I told my wife, this is when ChatGPT came out. I came back from reInvent that year and basically spent my entire time on a flight talking with ChatGPT, right? And I come back, she meets me at the airport, and I'm all excited about this. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. And she works in IT security. And she turned to me and said, isn't all the training data one big attack surface? And I was like, oh my God, she's right. And whenever I would tell other data scientists this or other AI engineers, they'd look at me like I had a tinfoil hat and I was some ranting lunatic, or nutter, I think is the British slang for that. Right.
Very good colloquial use.
Oh, thank you. I lived overseas for a while.
Yeah.
So I look like a complete nutter. And, you know, here we are a year or two later. What is the OWASP, like top 10 things? Like, I think number 3, basically the risk of like, you know, AI security is poisoned input data. Right. So today's paranoia is tomorrow's best practice in security for sure. So I often think about that, like, you know, to the untrained eye, right? Why are they so crazy about some of these aspects of the technology? Not the technology as a whole, but like you said, like there's certain aspects like, no, this shall not leave the borders, right? And you think, well, Jess seems kind of paranoid, and then kind of like this little voice in the back of my head, well, maybe it's not so. Maybe they know something they're not telling us, right? Certainly the NSA went from kind of in the early 2010s saying like, you should probably start thinking about changing your encryption infrastructure, to middle end of last decade saying, work on this now. This is a top priority. Like, and a lot of people were kind of scratching their chins, like giving each other the side eye, like, what do they know?
Mm-hmm.
What do they know? And if you've seen kind of like the advancements that's been made in quantum space in just the last, 12 months?
Huge. Yeah, huge.
I mean, again, 5-6 years ago, this seemed absolutely paranoid and insane. Now, maybe it's not, right? I don't know. Only time will tell.
There are cities, of people working on this, in all different areas. It will happen. When it happens there's much smarter people who perhaps can't put an exact date on that. So I'm not even going to try and make a judgment on it. But what I can say is money talks, and I think actually, let's use the UK US as an example again. Donald Trump was over in the UK a little while ago, and they were talking about various different trade deals, and the big players like Jensen and stuff were there. It is interesting actually how much influence he has. I see a few leather jackets around now and again, and I think, I don't need to ask him whose poster they've got on the wall.
Right.
And it was interesting to sort of see, quantum was mentioned a number of times, and in relative terms, the amount of money in the sector is minuscule, and compared to the rest of the industry that they were talking about. So just the fact that it was being brought up, says to me it's being discussed at those levels, and now the amount of money that's coming through says to me that this is happening. Quantum communication is proven already. They're pushing it over greater and greater distances. Toshiba's 254 kilometers, I think, from memory over fiber. Free space and satellite are next. These things are happening. I'm even speaking to, I would consider them specialists. Perhaps some of the potential employers or companies that are already in the space wouldn't. But people who've dedicated, I don't know, 7 years to 6-7 years to a PhD have developed, specific, QKD or QKRNG systems that fit onto a chip now. One chip. This equipment will in not too long fit into any device. It'll be no different to your GPU, CPU that'll fit into your device. Like, it's going to happen. What that technology looks like and its application and its cost. Who knows? What's memory cost these days? Like 0.0001 cent.
Well,
But
if it's DDR5, it might be a little more pricey than that. But
yeah.
But no, I mean, you're right. Like, and what's really scary, the thing that does kind of keep me up at night, is most of the chip manufacturing at the high level is all in Taiwan, which is one of the most disputed
certainly on a
bits
war
of real
footing,
estate.
isn't it? Yeah.
And even if whoever prevails in that fight, I don't pretend to know the future. Obviously, there's one side I'm rooting for, but Taiwan will probably be a pile of rubble, and it'll take another 20-30 years to rebuild it.
The scary thing is, I think people maybe don't, because it's just the sheer volume of electronics that we get through. I think
Right.
people don't. I think people just assume that it's just this, it's just this endless resource we have available.
Right.
But there's 4 or 5 places actually making this for the entire world. There was just before COVID, there was a fire at one of the facilities, and I think it was I'm sure it was in Japan.
I remember hearing about this. Yeah.
And basically, all of a sudden, we had a requirement for everyone to have a laptop so they could work remotely, and 20% of the world's capacity for manufacturing disappeared overnight in a fire.
Right.
And no one could get a laptop. And how long did that problem last?
It didn't stop at laptops. The scary thing was it Ford? One of the major U.S. car manufacturers had to shut down like their a number of lines because they couldn't have the chips in them. Like chips
well, this
are in
is
everything.
it. Obsolescence.
Right.
All of a sudden, perhaps the job that most of the engineering teams in electronics, that's like the job they don't want to do. Like it's a major issue. But yeah, I mean, automotive. 30 to 50 microcontrollers in a car.
Yeah.
Like it's everyone that goes onto the road probably. I dread to think how many there are in some of the modern electric cars.
Well, you think of like like a Prius or like a Tesla
Yeah.
or Rivian, right? Like it's probably mostly
Yeah.
it's effectively a mobile computer,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
No, but you're right.
It's a
And
car
like,
secondary almost, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's an entertainment system with
Yeah.
wheels. But the other thing too is like, just kind of putting like the not the tinfoil hat, but like the whatever stuff below that, right? Like audio manufacturing, factory production is a proxy for tank manufacturing, right? So like if you can disrupt all that with just in a very small bit of real estate on Earth, right? Now that's secure. That's probably not a coincidence that post-pandemic, they had a lot of talk about secure bill of materials, securing the supply chain, right? I mean, these are things that God forbid if the bullets do start flying, this is going to be a major problem. And the best time to not to address this would have been not offshoring all of this, but the second best time is kind of now before there are even more. I mean, there already are bullets flying in parts of the world, right?
Yeah, it's a super fragile ecosystem.
Right.
But I think it's perhaps one, many people are aware of it, and I'm not saying this like a global warming thing. Many of us are, have an opinion on that. I think people just perhaps don't understand how sort of like their capitalist economy. It's a bit of a, it's a bit of a delicate bridge. At all times, it's the same within the sort of semiconductor industry. Everything relies on it, and it's just these few companies who do it.
Well, it's an ecosystem, and it's
Yeah.
an ecosystem that has not had billions of years to evolve a certain amount of resiliency.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if you ever read Taleb, but like one of my favorite books and favorite concepts, Nicholas Nassim Taleb. He's an acquired taste. Audiobooks are way better than the printed version. I'll put that out there. Right. Don't hate on me. I think he's one of the smartest guys alive. But he basically talks about this notion of being anti-fragile, right? And he does it more flowery with more references to ancient literature. But the gist of it is that biological systems, when you work out, right, you get stronger because of that, right? So basically, it's not a fragile system. It breaks. Resilient systems can kind of work around it. An anti-fragile system means that the more it breaks, the stronger it gets. Right. So that's why, like, people who do martial arts, right, they get microfractures in their various parts of their body, right? It's a challenge. So basically the body will put more calcium and more structure there. So they actually get stronger because of that. That's kind of the notion. Natural ecosystems that kind of in, the rainforest and whatever have kind of built that in, presumably through trial and error over billions of years. Whereas our business systems don't have the benefit of billions of years of trial and error, right? I don't know, a little bit down the philosophical road on that.
No,
one,
not at all. We
but
can
I
actually
highly
bring that back
recommend
to
that
quantum
book.
as well, because
Yeah. Quantum's a great example. I mean, quantum is like going to be, I think the what's the word for it? But it's like it's going to be a microcosm of tech in the 21st century, right? Of, you're going to have, I mean, the birth of kind of our modern electronics era, basically, it was originally a World War II era way to break diplomatic codes for both the Germans and Japanese. Then it became a business technology. Then it became a defense technology. And then it really kind of overwhelmingly changed society in terms of all of that. Now we're kind of seeing that happen again, but we're going to see it happen, I think, compressed over a decade as opposed to 5 or 6 decades.
I think so, and I think the real there's a lot of, we've actually covered perhaps some of the drawbacks because there's a lot of unknown, but the positives will be that actually we will have the power to figure out the most complex problems that we can put into it,
right?
And it should be able to give us these solutions. Okay, what is the best way to build a resilient system to do this? What is the best way to build this material to do this? We need to go and mine here off our own planet because we're destroying it. What is the best way that we can build something to go and do this? Fusion energy is, is a, I wouldn't say it was a passion of mine, but it's it's something that I would love to see in my lifetime. True fusion energy being generated. And for those who perhaps not familiar with it, as opposed to us relying on nuclear fission energy, if we can have a clean source of star power that we can control on our own planet, all of a sudden, most of the problems that we have over resource will disappear. Everything else would hopefully sort of fall into line.
It really is the linchpin of
It is,
a
yeah.
post-scarcity society.
Yeah.
You think about it, like, it sounds ridiculous, right? And it sounds like somebody's probably listening. Candace is not. I know Candace wouldn't think this, but she's probably thinking these guys somebody's out there listening. These guys are full of it. No, it's true, right? What are wars fought over? They're fought over resources generally, right? Oil, right? Precious metals, and water. Increasingly, we're going to see, I think, a lot more water wars, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we're on a planet with like 70% water, right? It just takes a lot of energy to convert salt water into something drinkable, right? Yeah. If energy was not a problem, well, one, the oil problem goes away right away, right? Because you don't need it. And two, desalination becomes like, probably like something you could buy at Home Depot. I don't know what the home improvement.
It worked. Israel is a prime example. They're sort of in a desert effectively.
Right.
On the Mediterranean, they don't have any natural water resource to power a nation. And again, I don't want to get this into a political conversation by any stretch. They will avoid it, but effectively they feed a nation's water supply by desalination. They're one of the only nations in the world that does it. It's incredibly expensive to do so, and very difficult, but again,
but if that problem gets solved, there's a lot of problems, not all problems.
Yeah.
But if it's one of those things where one thing that annoys me, and again, we're treading on the event horizon of politics. There's an all or nothing mentality in politics, right? Oh my God, we have to get rid of all our carbon emissions by like some year. What if you just cut it in half? That's still winning, right? Like we've lost the sense of pragmatism, I think, in modern Western society. But it's not even just Israel, right? Saudi Arabia, right? Obviously, they aren't. The Gulf states are in an interesting position because one, they have a pretty good handle on resources for what's currently used in our energy, backbone of our energy supply. Two, a lot of solar opportunities there, right? They are, most of them are not. They're none of those countries that I'm aware of are landlocked, so they have that going for them too. And if you look, there's actually what's that site I keep banging on about, Candace? The one in the Emirates, TII, Technical Innovation Institute.ae. So it's TII.ae, I think. And if you look at it, it's basically like a shopping list of the 21st century, right? It's like, quantum security, AI, directed energy. They don't say weapons though, which is very, very smooth on their part, right? And a bunch of other things. Fusion, I think, was one of them, right? And it's kind of like those are the technologies that are going to define the 21st and maybe even the 22nd century. One of my favorite, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I'll throw in a plug for you can get a free audiobook on us, right? Go to thedatadrivenbook.com. But one of my favorite books it was called Titan, and it was a 30-hour listen, so you really had to be committed to it. It was about John D. Rockefeller, and how he started from just some, backwoods poor kid in Western New York, upstate New York. Candace is also from New York. So if it's not New York City, everything else is upstate. So, but people who come from like that part of the state, they're like, no, this is Western New York. And I'm like, if it's north of like a certain bridge, it's upstate. So anyway, the short of it is that, our entire society is governed by petroleum. No matter how many hands you glue to the pavement, no matter how much paint, you can't avoid it, from plastics to, everything, right? And a lot of that was set in the 1890s to early 1900s, right? That's why I look at a lot of this technology that's being developed now. That's going to determine the next century, right? Like you could say like the dot-com boom, the dot-com boom and bust. Oh my God, that was funny. Pets.com, sock puppets and all that. But no. You look at our daily lives, right? From, our phones to social media, that was really the groundwork infrastructure that was laid during the dot-com boom, right? So you had a lot of countries and a lot of societies saying, that's just website stuff. That's garbage. It'll never amount to anything. To, well, maybe it'll evolve into something that does change our lives. I know. Sorry, Candace. You probably have some more germane questions, but James is cool because like we can get just a good philosophical discussion.
Absolutely.
I like it.
Yes.
I agree, and I think for people who perhaps want to explain this to other people is, who are really either in the sector or really interested in the sector and want to get other people interested in the sector, is probably really to draw it back to the mechanical revolution, which we were all taught at school, industrial, mechanical. We are now at a quantum mechanical revolution. This is a, everything from Q onwards, Q day, whatever people want to call it, onwards, it's going to be a new generation. It will evolve.
Right.
I think that the ideas that we can put forward to it, to better humanity are, beyond anything that I've probably dreamt of comprehending, from how do we fix the recycling issue? How do we clean our oceans of plastic? How do we, design a system to do this? Whatever it might be, I think it's really exciting, and we're so close to it. These are the positives. It's more the sort of, I would say it's more the sort of public sector and the defense sector are the right people in the right places. It's right. That sort of, all the people who've founded these amazing companies, they've most of them seem to have the right mentality. The fact I said, they come to these agreements naturally where we're not going to poach each other. Let's just get this technology to go.
Right.
They're all of that mentality. But on the other side, you've got, I'm not going to throw the oil industry under the bus. I'm a petrol head. I love motorbikes. I love cars. If it's got an engine, happy days. Yeah, I love it. So, I'm definitely not going to throw that under the bus.
And well, even if you do throw the petroleum industry under the bus, you ever see that meme from the movie, the guy's wiping his tears with $100?
Yeah.
$100 bills. Like, that's probably them. Like, oh, don't make fun of me.
Yeah. but the sort of lobbying that's gone in, to that in the background, it's that the mentality of those people that will potentially pervert the promise, and again, don't want to get too political or anything, but that's the danger, or the I don't want to say which nation develops this technology first. I think it's obvious they're not going to share it or say we've done it, if they can avoid it. My hope is that it's just published. Great, right? It's out in the world. Right. We all have it now. It's still an equal playing field, that would probably be okay, I think. But yeah.
But there was actually, I think it was one of the oil sheiks from the Gulf that had said something to the effect the Stone Age didn't end because they ran out of stone. The Stone Age ended because somebody discovered bronze, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you kind of look at the overall economic development in that area, whether it's Dubai, whether it's Emirates, whether it's, they kind of took that to heart, right? Because it's more than just oil now, right? The other thing too is one of the interesting things in that book called Titan was, so Standard Oil was originally the big company, and it was their main business wasn't gasoline or petrol, I suppose. Their main business was for oil for lamps. So when it was pretty obvious that cities were electrifying, they basically had, we would call it today like a venture capital fund. So they basically funded a lot of the early automobile startups that we know and love today. Like Ford was one of them, where they basically helped make gasoline the dominant fuel for the emerging automobile industry, right? And that has had enormous impacts.
Create the product,
right? I mean, but I mean, in a real sense, like he was really the first one to create because he had a product that was basically coming to an end, right? Because if you ever dealt with kerosene lamps, they're not fun. They're kind of a nuisance and a fire hazard. So when cities started electrifying, he could have just kind of gave up, could have fought it, or he could just kind of like, let's find another use for this, right? And love him or hate him, he found another use for it, right? To the point now when we think oil industry, we think transportation, almost 100%.
But it's so much more than that. Like,
yeah, it is. There's a lot more.
People forget, like, every product we use is based on the byproduct of oil. Not every product, but pretty much every product in your home. Yeah. It's either been manufactured at some point with the power from it or the byproduct from it, whether it's plastics, etc. Like, it's in everything. So I'm definitely not an oil hater, but I think
people oversimplify it.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things, but they oversimplify it. Like, oh, it's carbon. No, man, carbon is the least awful thing that the petroleum industry does.
Yeah. I think the oil sludge fields on land and sea are a major issue. And actually, I used to work with a really small startup called Invorum. They're still going. They effectively created a cavitation system, so like a pit. I don't know if you've ever know of anything about a pistol shrimp, but effectively it uses like a cavitation punch. So it's like a pulse out to knock out its prey, and then goes in. And
I saw that.
Yeah, so they effectively took the idea of that cavitation effect and created a system to separate oil sludge from other products. They've fitted it into like a shipping container, 20, 40 foot, whatever size, and they've been trying it for years. But the simple fact is that system works, but it's been working for 10 years and it's still not been fully productized and mainstreamed. That's an issue that I hope, I think quantum technology doesn't fall into, around sort of IP and just stuff. There's too many blockers in the sector. I don't think that will happen, but yeah.
Yeah. So if you think carbon is like the worst thing that petroleum industry does, take a drive through New Jersey, and like the petrochemical state would be another name for it.
Take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath. Yeah. So
is it a bit smoggy there by the signs of it, or?
It's not as bad as it used to be, but growing up, like I grew up in that corridor, and like it was a thing. Like it was really, it was smelly, it was nasty. They used to call it Cancer Alley. Like, so there are plenty worse things.
Yeah. Like
that they do. Then I even if it'd be nice if we had better handle on chemistry and chemical research where it wouldn't be as impactful to people's health and the environment, right? Which I think is also a possibility with quantum tech, because
100%, and I think it goes beyond. Perhaps we could probably draw that to the application of material science. It doesn't have to be aerospace. We don't necessarily have to think all these glamorous, sexy alloys. We could be thinking of things like filters. Can we develop? If we look at, say, the filtration system that fits onto most diesel cars around the world, it's a very expensive piece of kit to manufacture. It's very complicated. They're heavy, could we develop a better version of that can fit into an industrial chimney, for example? Is that possible? I don't know. There's not a computer that's figured that out, but you pump that into a quantum computer and it goes, oh yeah, we'll mix these things together and great, we've got this new material. These things are, this is very abstract, and I'm not a material scientist. I'm not, but these are the sorts of things. If someone has the question, we should then have the power to answer that question pretty much straight away.
No, and you're right. Like theory, if you look at, but if you look at, like, there was it might have been Adam Savage, one of the Mythbuster guys. So there's a TV show called The Expanse, which is based on a series of books, and basically, like he says it better than I do, but basically something to the effect of, like, the only thing that really keeping us from exploring, near Earth and kind of like the asteroid belt and stuff like that, which is kind of part of the story, is really our material science hasn't caught up to our ambitions. And, he didn't mention quantum computing, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, quantum could solve a lot of those problems.
Yeah. Even things like, I'll bring it back to fusion energy,
Right.
Distance and materials are the reason we cannot do this.
Mm-hmm.
If we suddenly have an abundance of power, I've been to I used to work with the Cullum Centre for Fusion Energy, so I've been to the jet reactor there a number of times, and actually they did a quite funny what to do in the event of a meltdown fire. It's not like a fission reactor, obviously, like it's not thingy, but the fire brigade actually gets called, and you're like, what are they going to do if they turn up? Like 20 trillion degrees Celsius melting through right now, like that. They can just throw some water on it, like that ain't gonna work. But anyway, they were sort of talking to me, and this was years ago, when I'd first started working in what I do now, and they were sort of talking to me about the applications, and they were the ones who said to me, yes, it generates abundant power, we can do X, Y, Z with it, but actually space travel is a real viable option for this technology if we can, get it to the point where we might, similar to what Rolls-Royce developed for most of the submarines that are out there, those sort of miniaturized nuclear reactors, that operate for 100 plus years, maintenance free. Great, it's up and running, we just leave it there. It's not quite that simple, but yeah.
Interesting. All right, so I see the timer. We've gone a little bit over, but great talking to you. And any parting thoughts, Candace?
Oh, that we have to have him on. We have to have him back because
100%, man.
I want to know more, and I want to know more about recruiting and what they're looking for.
We didn't cover much recruitment.
We didn't talk about that.
But it was a really great conversation. So that's why we're going to have you back. But it really was great. It really was great.
Well, I hope you both have thank you for having me on. I hope you both have a wonderful Christmas and New Year.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I know you're not long off the back of Thanksgiving, so enjoy the festive period, time off. Give me a shout. We'll perhaps do this again. I can maybe talk some actual specific recruitment stuff.
Awesome. And we'll cue the outro music.
Breaking the mold. Science and sky beats, it's bold and it's gold. The multiverse is skanking in time. Black holes are wailing in a horn line so fine. From Planck scales to planets, they're connecting the dots. Candace and Frank, they're the cosmic hot shots. Breaking the mold, science and sky beats. It's bold and it's gold.